Ladies and gentlemen, I am Lady Lilith, and welcome to Eerie Embers. In the shadowed corridors of the early 20th century, Brighton's charming facade as a seaside haven masked a darker, more sinister truth. The town, once famed for its clandestine weekend rendezvous, became infamous for a series of ghastly crimes that would haunt its history, forever entwining its name with bloodshed. Brighton, a picturesque seaside town, has long been the subject of media attention for a variety of reasons. Known for its charming labyrinth of narrow alleys, antique shops brimming with treasure, and a nightlife that pulses with energy, Brighton is a town that effortlessly blends the quaint with the wild. Its vibrant LGBTQ+ community makes it the epicenter of pride celebrations, attracting revelers from far and wide to experience a day of unapologetic joy and solidarity. Yet beneath its lively and colourful surface, Brighton harbours a darker, more sinister history. The town served as the ominous backdrop for the Graham Greene's iconic novel, Brighton Rock, a gritty murder thriller set in the 1930s that delves into the murky underworld of crime and corruption. The tension and violence that permeates the novel are echoes of the real-life clashes between mods and rockers that once shook the town streets, turning Brighton into a battleground for youth subcultures. But perhaps the most chilling of all is Brighton's connection to the infamous Trunk Murders, a series of grisly crimes that left the town with a haunting legacy. The media dubbed them the Brighton Trunk Murders, as the town became the starting point of the gruesome saga. The first discovery of a dismembered body stuffed into a trunk marked the beginning of a macabre chapter in Brighton's history. This seaside town, with its mix of charm and darkness, continues to captivate the imagination, its idyllic facade forever shrouded by the spectres of its past. On the 6th of June 1934, Brighton was bathed in sunlight, and the town buzzed with the excitement as the home football team, Brighton and Hove, faced off against their local rivals, Crystal Palace. Amid the hustle and bustle of the day, an inconspicuous figure made their way to the Brighton railway station, carrying a wooden trunk. Without drawing any attention, the person deposited the trunk at the luggage department and slipped away, leaving behind what would soon be the centre of a horrifying discovery. 2 weeks passed, and the ordinary rhythm of the station was disrupted by something far from ordinary. The luggage supervisor, William Joseph Vinicombe, began to notice a strange and increasingly foul odour wafting through the air. Disturbed by the stench, he traced it to a wooden trunk that had been left unclaimed for days. Unease gnawing at him, Vinicombe called the police. Chief Inspector Donaldson, seasoned and sharp, was quick to respond. Arriving at the scene, he wasted no time in prying open the ominous trunk. What lay inside would shock even the most hardened of investigators. Wrapped tightly in brown paper, as if in a grotesque parody of a gift, was the torso of a woman. The scene was one of stark horror, the remnants of a life brutally cut short. Donaldson's practiced eyes estimated the woman to be around 40 years old. though her identity and the circumstances of her death remained a grim mystery. The discovery of the trunk's contents marked the beginning of a macabre investigation that would soon reveal a darker side of Brighton, casting a shadow over the sunny seaside town. The sinister saga continued just days later, on the 17th of June, when the bustling platforms of King's Cross Station became the scene of another grisly discovery. A trunk left unclaimed and now emitting a nauseating stench had caught the attention of station staff. The police were summoned once more, and with a sense of grim familiarity, they pried open the second trunk. What they found inside only deepened the horror. A pair of legs and feet, wrapped meticulously in the same manner as the torso found in Brighton. It didn't take long for authorities to piece together that the legs and the feet belonged to the same unfortunate woman whose torso had been discovered earlier. Yet despite this connection, the mystery of her identity persisted. Her head and hands, the key to recognizing her, were still missing. The post-mortem was conducted by Sir Bernard Spilsbury, the esteemed pathologist who had become known for his work on the most perplexing cases. His examination revealed chilling details. The person who had dismembered the body displayed some knowledge of anatomy, though they were no expert. Perhaps someone with rudimentary medical training, or a butcher with a dark side. Spilsbury also refuted the earlier estimate of the woman's age. Rather than being around 40, she was in her late 20s, her life cut tragically short. The most heartbreaking revelation came with the discovery that she had been 5 months pregnant at the time of her death. Spilsbury determined that she had been killed shortly before the 6th of June. Further examination of her skin led Spilsbury to a startling conclusion. This woman, with her delicate, almost elegant features, was likely from a middle-class background. Her refined upbringing a stark contrast to the brutal end that she had met. Her feet, in particular, were noted for their grace, slender and well-maintained, like those of a dancer. The media, ever eager to sensationalize, quickly dubbed her Pretty Feet, a tragic moniker that belied the horrific fate that had befallen her. As the investigation unfolded, the discovery of the second trunk plunged the authorities and the public deeper into a nightmare. As they grappled with the haunting question of who this woman was and why she had been so brutally slain. The investigation into the gruesome trunk murders soon led the police to a potential suspect, Dr. Edward Messiah, a man with a notorious reputation. Messiah was known as an abortionist, operating on the fringes of legality, and his dubious practice had earned him a shadowy place in Brighton's underworld. Given the circumstances of the crime and the grim discovery of the pregnant victim, the authorities saw him as a person of interest in the murder of the woman they had come to call Pretty Feet. The police, intent on gathering more evidence, decided to place Messiah under discreet observation. However, in a disastrous breach of protocol, a local policeman, either out of misguided loyalty or negligence, tipped Messiah off about the surveillance. Realizing that he was under suspicion, Messiah wasted no time in leaving Brighton behind, relocating to London. Once in London, Messiah's dark activities continued unchecked. Tragically, he was implicated in the death of another woman while performing an abortion. Despite the gravity of the crime, Messiah was never prosecuted, slipping through the cracks of the justice system once more. His connection to the Trunk Murders remained a shadowy suspicion. He was never formally identified as a suspect in the murder of Pretty Feet, leaving a haunting void in the investigation. With their primary lead now out of reach, and little else to go on, the police found themselves at a dead end. Desperate for any clue that could crack the case, they turned to the public for assistance. They issued pleas through the media, urging anyone who recognised the woman or knew of a missing friend to come forwards. Their call extended further, seeking any witnesses who might have seen a man who deposited the cursed trunk at the Brighton railway station. The case, already steeped in tragedy, now hung in a perilous balance, with the hope that someone, somewhere, held the key to unlocking the identity of Pretty Feet and the truth behind her gruesome death. A month after the horrifying discovery at King's Cross, the nightmare of the Trunk Murders took a grim turn with the revelation of a third trunk. This time, however, the trunk was not left in a public space, but rather concealed within a local flat. It was on the 6th of July that a painter, working in the vicinity, was overwhelmed by a pungent and unsettling odour emanating from one of the flats nearby. Disturbed by the rank smell, he promptly alerted the police, who responded with a sense of urgency. The flat in question was located at 52 Kemp Street, a modest building that would soon become the focal point of a new chapter in the grisly case. Despite the clear indication of a foul smell, the police inexplicably chose to place the property under surveillance for 48 hours before making an entry. The reasons behind this delay remain unclear, but the precautionary measure did little to quell the rising tension surrounding the investigation. When the police finally forced their way into the flat, the source of the noxious odour was revealed to be a black trunk, stark and foreboding. Inside the black trunk, the police uncovered the body of a third woman, whose remains were shockingly different from those found previously. Unlike the dismembered parts of the earlier victim, this body was intact, though it bore the unmistakable signs of brutal violence. This woman had been violently beaten around the head, a savage assault that left her unrecognisable and further complicated the search for answers. The tenant of the flat, a 26-year-old man named Tony Massini, immediately drew the attention of investigators. However, Massini was nowhere to be found, adding to the mounting tension surrounding the case. The police, driven by the urgency of the situation, launched a manhunt for him. Their search came to fruition on the 18th of July, when Massini was apprehended in London. Brought back to Brighton under heavy scrutiny, he was subjected to intense questioning. As the investigation delved deeper, a startling discovery was made. Tony Mancini was actually the alias used by Cecile Lewis England, a known low-level criminal with a history of minor offences. Mancini, or rather England, had previously surfaced on the police radar after the discovery of the first trunk. At the time, it had been determined that he could not have been responsible for both the first and the second trunks, leading to his release. However, with the discovery of the third trunk, the authorities were now faced with the unsettling possibility that England might be more deeply involved than initially thought. The revelation of England's true identity and his connection with the latest grisly find cast a new light on the investigation. With the horrifying pattern of the murders and the disturbing evidence mounting, the police were left to untangle the complex web of clues and suspects, striving to make sense of the macabre puzzle that had already claimed so many lives. The grim discovery of the third trunk brought with it a revelation that deepened the tragedy and complexity of the case. The body found inside was identified as Violet Kay, a 44-year-old woman with a troubled life. Kay was known to be a prostitute, and her connection to Tony Mancini, the man now revealed to be using the alias Cecile Lewis England, was a significant lead. The timeline of Kay's final days painted a haunting picture. On the 10th of May 1934, Mancini was working as a security guard at the Skylark Cafe on the seafront, a place that would soon be marred by the dark events that followed. That night, Kay had entered the cafe in a state of drunken fury, accusing Mancini of having an affair with a teenage waitress. She caused a scene that left a mark on all who witnessed it. The confrontation, fueled by intoxication and jealousy, was the last anyone saw of her alive. Kay's sudden disappearance remained a mystery until Mancini, confronted with mounting evidence, decided to confess. He admitted that upon returning to his flat at 44 Park Crescent, a high-class area where Kay had been making a lucrative living as a prostitute, had found her lifeless body on the bed. The luxury of the neighbourhood contrasted sharply with the horror of the crime, highlighting the stark divide between Kay's professional success and her tragic end. Mancini's confession unveiled a chilling scene. He described how Kay, whose career had provided her with a degree of financial stability, had met her violent death in what should have been a secure and respectable environment. The details he provided painted a vivid, tragic picture of Kay's final moments and set the stage for a deeper investigation into her murder. The authorities were left grappling with the implications of Mancini's admission. As the case now intertwined with Kay's violent end and the pattern of the earlier trunk murders, the investigation delved further into the life and death of Violet Kay, seeking to uncover the full extent of the horror that had unfolded within the seamlessly serene facade of Brighton's high-class quarters. As the investigation into Violet Kay's murder unravelled, a disturbing narrative emerged, casting Tony Mancini, now known to be Cecile Lewis England, in a particularly grim light. In a desperate attempt to cover his tracks and distance himself from the heinous crime, Mancini made a series of ill-fated decisions that only deepened the mystery and horror surrounding the case. Fearing that the authorities would suspect him of Kay's murder, Mancini took a chilling step to conceal her death. He procured a trunk to store her dismembered body, attempting to manage the gruesome remains in a way that he thought would prevent immediate discovery. After carefully placing Kay's body in the trunk, Mancini moved it to the flat on Kemp Street, an address where he had previously resided. This macabre act of concealment was part of a desperate attempt to mislead the investigation and buy himself some time. Once the truck was placed in Kemp Street, Mancini fled to London, hoping to evade the inevitable scrutiny that was closing in on him. However, his attempt to escape only drew further attention and suspicion. The police, piecing together the disturbing sequence of events, were not convinced by Mancini's evasive actions and the dubious circumstances surrounding the trunk's discovery. Despite the mounting evidence against Mancini in connection with Kay's murder, authorities struggled to link him to the earlier trunks found at the Charing Cross and King's Cross stations. The connection between the three trunks remained tenuous, and there was no concrete evidence tying Mancini to the initial dismemberments that had shocked Brighton. Nonetheless, the brutal nature of Kay's murder and the subsequent attempt to cover it up left little room for leniency. On the 18th of July, Mancini was charged with the murder of Violet Kay. The gravity of the charge reflected the authorities' determination to hold him accountable for his actions, even as they grappled with the broader implications of the case. While the evidence directly linking him to the first two trunk murders remained elusive, the police and the public were left to confront the chilling reality of the man who had orchestrated such a grisly sequence of events. The case highlighted the dark underbelly of Brighton, a town that had been forever marked by the horrors contained within these trunks. The trial of Tony Mancini, who had been charged with the murder of Violet Kay, began in December 1934 and swiftly became the focal point of intense legal scrutiny and public interest. Throughout the 5-day trial, the defence team meticulously crafted their case around one crucial point. Violet Kay had been found with a substantial amount of morphine in her system. The defence argued that Kay was an habitual user of the drug, suggesting that her death could have been a result of an overdose rather than a deliberate act of violence. The prosecution struggled to counter this argument, and, with no other suspects presenting themselves, the case against Mancini became increasingly tenuous. After deliberating for just over 2 hours, the jury reached a verdict of not guilty, exonerating Mancini of Kay's murder. The verdict left the curse with a haunting void, and no other suspects emerged to take responsibility for the brutal crime. The acquittal of Mancini did little to alleviate the cloud of suspicion and unanswered questions that loomed over the case. However, the story took a dramatic turn over 4 decades later. On the 29th of November 1976, in a shocking revelation that would revive the long-dormant case, Mancini, now living under his real name of Cecil England, admitted to a reporter of the News of the World that he did indeed kill Violet Kay. This confession came too late to bring any legal consequences, as England could no longer be tried for the murder due to the passage of time and the legal statutes that protected him from further prosecution. England's admission added a disturbing coda to the tragic story, confirming the suspicions that had lingered and casting a long shadow over the events of 1934. The confession did little to undo the damage of the past, but provided a grim closure to the mystery surrounding Violet Kay's death. The case, marked by its macabre details and the tragic fate of its victims, remained a dark chapter in the annals of Brighton's history, forever remembered for the chilling revelations that had emerged from the trunks. Thank you for listening.